Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 23, and today we are diving deep into a truly fascinating, and let's be honest, a pretty radical idea. It comes from the book The Nuclear Umbrella, written by the strategic visionary Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir, and the core idea he puts forward is this.
Just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about some loose treaty or a simple military alliance here. The vision laid out is for one single, technological shield, seamlessly connecting the skies from the coast of Africa all the way to the heart of Asia. It's a massive concept, a truly game-changing idea, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
So let's get right into the author's argument. To really grasp the solution he's proposing, we first have to understand the problem he says this shield is designed to solve in the first place.
Okay, section 1, the problem of air vulnerability. Before you can build a shield, you've got to know exactly what you're shielding against. So to get to the how of this whole thing, we've got to start with the why. The entire reason for this massive project is based on a very specific diagnosis of a very modern problem, being completely vulnerable from the sky.
And, according to the author, the entire nature of modern conflict has changed. It's not about lines on a map anymore. When you look at this list, drone attacks, long-range missile strikes, stealth aircraft, even cyber attacks designed to blind your radars, it becomes crystal clear. Whoever controls the skies, well, they really do control the entire battlefield.
And to really hammer this point home, the author doesn't just talk theory. He points directly to recent history, highlighting what he sees as these critical, catastrophic failures in national air defense. Let's quickly run through the key examples he lays out in the book.
First up, he points to Iraq. Now, the argument here is that they actually had the right equipment. The hardware was there. But, and this is the absolute key, it wasn't integrated. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and that created these fatal gaps in their defense.
Then, he brings up Libya. And this, according to the book, was a completely different kind of failure. We're talking about a total, near-instant collapse of their entire air defense network the moment it was actually put to the test.
And finally, Syria. Here, the problem wasn't a total collapse, but something maybe even more dangerous, fragmentation. The airspace just shattered into pieces, leading to a complete loss of sovereign control. So the author's conclusion from all this is pretty stark. Standalone, national air defense systems, they're just not going to cut it anymore.
And that leads us directly to the next part of his argument. If individual, isolated systems are the problem, then the solution has to be integration, right? So let's take a look at the massive scale and the core reasons behind this proposed union.
The scale of this proposal is, it's just staggering. We're not talking about 5 or 10 countries here. We're talking about 57 nations spread out across 3 continents. But the author's argument is that this huge interconnected geography isn't a weakness at all. In fact, he says it's the very reason a unified defense is so absolutely essential.
And this table really gets to the heart of the logic. The author basically draws a direct line between shared strategic assets, places like the Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea, and what he defines as shared threats. The idea is really simple when you break it down. If your geography and your threats are shared, then your defense has to be shared too.
All right, so we've covered the why, the problem, and the rationale for coming together. Now let's get into the really interesting part, the how. This is the core of the whole proposal, the actual blueprint for this so-called Muslim dome.
So here it is, the core definition right from the text. And this is super important. It's not just about a bunch of countries buying the same missiles. The key words you have to focus on are share and integrated. We're talking about creating one single seamless entity, from the tiny sensor that first detects a threat all the way to the interceptor that takes it out of the sky. The author then breaks this massive concept down into 4 pillars that all lean on each other. First, you have shared radars. The idea is to create one single unbroken line of sight across millions of square kilometers. No blind spots. That data then feeds instantly into a shared early warning system, so a threat to one nation becomes an immediate, known threat to all 57. Then, of course, you need the response, an integrated network of shared missiles that can engage a threat from anywhere. And who's running the show? A single, integrated command to coordinate the entire shield. And really, this quote from the author himself just says it all. The goal isn't some loose alliance. It's about creating a strategic equal to the most advanced air defense systems in the world, something with that same reputation of being practically impenetrable. So, we've walked through the problem as the author sees it, the rationale behind integration, and the actual blueprint itself. This leaves us with one final and probably most important thing to think about. What would this all actually mean? What are the strategic implications if something like this were to exist? And that, right there, is the core question at the heart of the book, The Nuclear Umbrella. We've laid out the author's blueprint for you, but the final thought is really yours to ponder. If this vision of a single protected sky covering 57 nations were ever to become a reality, how would that fundamentally redraw the entire map of global power? Have you ever wondered what it would take to build an invisible shield across multiple countries, one that could stop just about any airborne threat you could imagine? Well, that's the incredibly ambitious idea laid out in Zahir Ahmad Mir's book, The Nuclear Umbrella, and today we're going to break down his proposed blueprint. So, where do you even start? I mean, it's one thing for a single country to defend its own airspace, but creating a truly integrated shield, one that stretches across a huge region with all these different partners, well, the political and technological challenges are just staggering. Let's dig into how the book suggests you could pull it off.
The solution laid out in the book is, frankly, pretty radical. It's a 5-layered defense system. The whole idea is to create what's called a defense in depth, where each layer has a very specific job, and they all work together to create a shield that's nearly impossible to get through.
So the system is built on these 5 core layers. We're going to walk through each one, starting way out in space and coming all the way down to the invisible world of cyberspace. First up, you have to be able to see the threat coming. All right, layer 1. This is all about seeing a threat the very second it's born. Think of this as the system's eyes and ears, way up high above the Earth, giving everyone the earliest possible warning that an attack is underway. The book actually gives it a name, the Muslim Early Warning Satellite Network, or MUSENet for short. Its job is to spot the massive heat signature from a missile launch and to track those really tricky targets, like stealth aircraft and drones. The proposal specifically points to Pakistan, Turkey, and Malaysia as key players here, probably because of their existing tech and their strategic locations.
And here's why this is such a big deal. The author argues that having this layer in space gives you a 60 to 90-second head start. Now, that might not sound like a lot of time, but in the world of missile defense, that is an eternity. It's the critical window of time that could be the difference between a successful intercept and total disaster.
Okay, so MUSENet spots a threat. What happens next? Well, that's where the next layer comes in. This one is designed to reach out and engage that threat from a very, very long way out, taking care of it before it even gets close. We're talking about an engagement range of 200 to 400 kilometers. The book pictures integrating really advanced missile systems like Turkey's Hisar-Up, and even suggests jointly acquiring other proven tech, like the Chinese HQ-9B. The idea is to pool resources, with countries like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey leading the charge on this one. Now let's move a little closer to home, to the third layer. So let's say a threat somehow slips past that long-range defense. The next thing it would run into is this dense, protective curtain of interceptors. The goal here is basically saturation. You want to create what the author calls a dense mid-range curtain. This would work by networking a bunch of different systems from different countries, like Egypt's Buk-1M and Pakistan's LY-80. And just to show how complex this gets, the book even mentions that Iran could potentially be included, but that it would be conditional, depending on how alliances shake out in the future.
All right, we're down to the 4th layer. This is the last line of physical defense. It's designed to protect specific, really high-value targets and to stop anything that has somehow made it through all the other layers. You can think of it as the final bodyguard.
This layer is all about dealing with those close-in, low-altitude threats. We're talking drone swarms, cruise missiles, even attack helicopters. The blueprint suggests that this is a job for every single member state, using joint systems like Pakistan's Fateh and Turkey's Korkut systems to get it done.
And that brings us to the 5th and, honestly, maybe the most futuristic layer of them all. This one doesn't fire a single missile. Nope. Instead, it fights on the electromagnetic spectrum. It creates an invisible shield of electronic and cyber defense.
So this layer is all about disruption. Its job is to jam the guidance systems of enemy missiles, to blind their radars, and to sow chaos in attacking drone swarms. And, just as important, it also has to protect the entire shield's own digital networks from cyber attacks. The book really highlights the expertise of countries like Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia for this job. But look, having 5 separate layers is totally useless if they can't talk to each other. So how do you make them all work like a single, well-oiled machine? Well, the book's answer is a massive integrated sensor grid, basically the nervous system that connects every single part of the shield.
The book calls it the Muslim Integrated Sensor Dome, or MISD. The concept behind it is simple, but it is incredibly powerful. You network every single radar, every sensor from all the participating countries. When you do that, you transform dozens of separate little viewpoints into one giant, all-seeing eye.
And this really shows you how collaborative this whole idea is meant to be. Each country would bring its own unique assets to the table. You'd have Saudi Arabia's long-range radars, Pakistan's AWACS early warning planes, Turkey's advanced ACES systems. Every single piece adds to a much more complete picture of what's going on.
This quote from the book just perfectly sums up the whole principle. There are no blind spots. A threat that's spotted by a single coastal radar in Egypt would instantly pop up on the screens of every single operator across the entire network, instantly. So, if the sensor grid is the nervous system, then this next part has to be the brain. A shield this complicated and this fast needs a central command to make split-second decisions based on that constant flood of information coming from the grid.
So the blueprint proposes setting up a central air defense headquarters in Riyadh, and this command center would have the ultimate authority. It would manage the entire airspace, give the order to launch interceptors, figure out who's a friend and who's a foe, and issue those critical defense orders.
And this, right here, is the ultimate goal. The entire system, from the satellite spinning in orbit to the operator sitting in Riyadh, is designed to shrink that decision-making loop down to just a few seconds. In modern warfare, that kind of speed is survival.
So let's just put it all together for a second. What the book, The Nuclear Umbrella, is proposing isn't just a missile shield, it's a whole ecosystem. You've got 5 layers of defense, a unified sensor grid acting as the nervous system, and a central command that serves as the brain. Now, the author presents all of this as a blueprint for defensive stability. But you have to ask, could a shield this powerful, this integrated, be seen differently by others? Could it accidentally become the very thing that kicks off a whole new regional arms race? That's the really complex question at the heart of this entire blueprint.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're digging into a pretty radical strategic vision from the book, The Nuclear Umbrella by Zahir Ahmad Mir. It imagines a future where the entire Muslim world is protected by a single, unified, and incredibly advanced air shield. It's a huge concept, so let's break down what the author is actually proposing. Get this. This one sentence, which is actually from the book's conclusion, really sums up the entire ambition here. It's a powerful promise of collective security, and it's the core idea we're going to explore today. So what's the first step to making this happen? Well, the book proposes creating a combined rapid reaction joint air force. You can almost think of it like a Muslim NATO, but one that's totally focused on controlling the skies. Okay, so with an idea this massive, you've got to ask, right? Who would actually be in this thing? And the author doesn't just leave it at theory. Nope, the book gets really specific, laying out a potential roster of nations and the serious hardware they'd bring to the table. So take a look at this. What's really wild is just how diverse this proposed fleet is. According to the book, this force would blend everything from Pakistan's JF-17s and Turkey's brand new Ka-an fighter, all the way to Saudi Arabia's huge F-15 fleet. It also pulls together European, Russian, and American hardware from all over the Muslim world. Now, on paper, that mix creates an incredibly powerful force, but it also gives you a hint of the huge logistical challenge of making all these different systems actually work together. Now, obviously, you can't have a force this powerful and this mixed without some clear rules of the road. I mean, how do you stop a shield like this from turning into a sword? The book argues it would need one simple guiding doctrine for all its actions. So what's that one core rule going to be? How do you even get all these different air forces on the same page without causing total chaos? And here's the answer the book gives, a simple but powerful doctrine. Air defense first, offensive second. The key thing to get here is that its main job is to protect. The sword, well, that only comes out after the shield is up. And this whole defense first idea ties right back into the ultimate goal of the project. According to the author, the whole point of this massive air force is to make one simple guarantee, that no city in any of these allied nations is ever left vulnerable to an attack from the sky ever again. Okay, so a plan is one thing on paper, right? But what happens when the rubber meets the road? Well, the book actually lays out 4 really different high-stakes scenarios to show how this air shield might work in the real world. The first scenario the book dives into is one of the most volatile flashpoints you can imagine: a crisis in Gaza with heavy aerial bombardment. So in this situation, the book pictures this unified air force jumping into action. We're talking intercepting incoming missiles, establishing protected air corridors for civilians, and escorting aid flights right to their destinations. The author makes it clear the goal isn't to win a war here, but simply to shut down the immediate threat from the air and save lives on the ground. All right, for the second scenario, the book really cranks up the tension. It imagines a crisis in Kashmir escalating between 2 nuclear powers. Now, in a situation this dangerous, the book's argument is that by combining Pakistani, Turkish, and Saudi air defense systems, you'd create this incredibly powerful defensive net. And that shield, the author suggests, could be what stops either side from getting the upper hand with missiles, blocks any surprise air attacks, and basically prevents a catastrophic miscalculation that could lead to something much, much worse. The third scenario switches gears a bit. It moves away from military clashes and focuses more on protecting a nation's economy, picturing a situation where Yemen's key assets are under fire. So here, the book sees the shield playing a bunch of different roles at once. It's not just about protecting people in cities, but also defending the economic lifelines of the country. We're talking its ports, its energy infrastructure, and even making sure pilgrims can travel safely. It's really about creating stability far beyond just the battlefield. And for the last scenario, we're looking at a huge global choke point. The book imagines what would happen if someone tried to blockade the Red Sea, and how this alliance would handle maritime security and international trade. The book's answer to this is a really high-tech, coordinated defense. The idea is to link up all the Allied maritime radars and fire up the coastal air defense systems all at once. By doing that, they could get a complete picture of what's happening, allowing them to take out threats like drones and, in the author's view, guarantee that this critical trade route stays wide open. So, you see, these 4 scenarios, they're not just random examples. As the book lays it out, they're all building blocks, leading up to one massive strategic goal. The first big takeaway the author presents is this: if you create this alliance, you've effectively given the collective complete control, total sovereignty, over its own skies. And that brings us full circle, right back to that powerful line from the beginning. But now, after seeing the proposed forces, the doctrine, and these scenarios, that statement carries the full weight of the author's argument. It's a vision of total solidarity against any threat from the air. And all of this leads to the book's ultimate claim, the very top of the pyramid, the author's endgame. The whole point of this entire strategy is to achieve something they call strategic invincibility, all thanks to this united air shield. Look, the vision laid out in this book, The Nuclear Umbrella, is, well, it's undeniably ambitious. It's proposing a complete rewrite of regional power dynamics and the very idea of collective security. And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. What would be the geopolitical implications of an alliance like this?